Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. How is everybody? You know, the last caller made me think of a phone call that I made this week to a friend of mine. And this is an old friend of mine who I've known since my college days. And we went all 4 years together, two different schools, but we transferred at the same time we went to a 2-year college and transferred at the same time to a 4-year college, as did a bunch of the other people that I went to in the 2-year college. But my friend Jack, and I've talked about him before, Jack was just amazing. The first time I met him, we're sitting at lunch, all right, in the cafeteria. This guy comes up. He's got long hair, and he looks like a hippie. He looked like a 60s hippie, and this would be September of 73. So hippies were still around. And Jack walks up, and someone says, "Hey, what's up, Jack?" He says, "Well, you know, I got my work boots on, got my work pants on, my work belt on, my work gloves on, my work shirt on, my work jacket on, my work hat on. I'm heading to the welfare office." And so immediately everyone went, "Who is this guy?" Now, we really never talked politics for the longest time. We didn't. It wasn't a thing that we discussed. So I never knew his politics. So years later, when I went to Buffalo to be a talk show host, and it was my first live broadcast from somewhere. And there I am at whatever the event was, and I can see him walking up, and this has to be, 20 years later, 20 years after when I first met him. He looks the same. Still looks like a hippie. Comes walking up with his son, but he comes walking up, and I'm like, oh, man, it's Jack. He's going to get on my case. He's got to be a liberal. He's a hippie, right? That's my stereotype of him as he walks up. And he walks up, first thing out of his mouth, "Hey, don't worry. I think I'm more conservative than you are." I'm like, okay, we're okay then. He also, I should have known it though, because Jack was a college instigator, but in a different way. When we went to college, the New York State Labor Party was an absolute Marxist party, and Lyndon LaRouche was part of it. The whole Lyndon LaRouche way back. And the Lyndon LaRouche people would come in and they'd protest all the time. And back then it was the Queen of England runs the entire cocaine trade or whatever conspiracy that they had. But they were full of every type of conspiracy known to mankind. Now, there was never really a fight or anything. They were just loud and screaming at people in the student union. So one day we're eating lunch and we're sitting on top of this wall. This is inside. It was a huge inside student union. They had this wall and you could sit on top of it. And there we are, looking down. And Jack says, "Oops, there they are." And the Lyndon LaRouche people are down there, but they're just handing out. They're just like handing out pamphlets. They're not really yelling at anybody, and nobody's really paying attention. A few people are like, whatever, get away, because they were there all the time. Jack goes up, starts talking to one of the guys, and just immediately says, "What? You want to burn the flag? What? Are you preaching communism? Are you a communist?" Now, the guy wasn't even talking to him about that. Jack went up and just laid into him. And then people are walking by and he turns to these people and goes, "This guy's a communist. This guy wants to burn the flag." And then people start yelling at each other. Jack sort of moves away as the mini riot begins, comes back up. We continue eating lunch and watching a little bit of chaos break loose, and he's just sitting there smiling. But I called him the other day. He texted me about music stuff. Jack became a camera person, photographer for a bunch of different rock stars. And I've actually seen him at concerts. I called him one time at a concert, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's Jack over there filming it. And he's been involved in documentaries and everything, and he knows everybody. And so there was a show coming to Buffalo, because he's still in Buffalo, and he said, hey, you might be interested in this. It's really a cool thing. And I decided to call him. He had texted me. I don't remember the last time I talked to him. What a great conversation. Went on for probably an hour. We really caught up on everything. And I can't give you the names, but he started telling me all of these rock people that are conservative. But they don't really promote it, but they're conservative. And a couple of the names blew my mind. And I went, no way. And he goes, yeah, I know. Whenever I say that name to people, people say, there's no way. And he goes, no. If you talk to him, he's really a conservative. And I just don't want to say it publicly because I don't like outing people. But then we started talking about a friend of ours who was a musician who did what my neighbor did. He did it a couple of weeks ago. He said, if you voted for Trump, unfriend me right now. So I did. And he's a cool guy who I've known, this musician I've known for, and so is Jack. We've known this guy, I don't know, since 77, 78. And in fact, this musician bought my old TIAC reel-to-reel machine to record some of his stuff back, I think, in like 1980. And we have a great relationship, but, you've got the TDS out there where people freak out. And it was a great conversation because the conversation was much like the last caller who voted for Trump. But it's like, well, look, I'm an independent thinker. If the Republicans do something wrong, I'm going to criticize them. And Jack said, yeah, the same thing. He goes, look, I love Trump. I think he communicates. He doesn't communicate as effectively as he could. He goes, but I'd vote for him again. He goes, because it's, as we both agreed, it was a binary choice. And he's better than anybody else out there. And it's simply, it's that simple. But he's an independent thinker. I'm an independent thinker. But what a great conversation with him, though. It was great to go back and look at people who you've known for the longest time. And he did ask me the question. He said, man, he's like, how long are you going to stay in? And I told him he didn't know. He had no idea. One thing he didn't know, because he was in journalism broadcasting, too, in college. He didn't know that I never wanted to do talk radio, that I was forced to do it. So that was interesting telling him. He said, you mean you didn't want to do it? And I went, no. But I got in and they started paying me more money, and I was still trying to get back into music radio, and I was dabbling a little bit in, trying to break into stand-up comedy in some way. The last thing I wanted to do was be in talk radio. And he said, now? And I said, I love the process. I don't want to retire. I said, I have no interest in retiring. I want to talk in front of the microphone more than anything. He goes, yeah, I got that about you. And then I told him a story about another friend of mine that he knows who called me one time and said, in fact, it was when, it was a couple of years after Eric and I were working together. And I think it was when the notification when Westwood One took us over. And that made the trade magazines and all that. And a friend of mine called me up and she said, and it's true, she said, you lucky SOB. You got everything you wanted. I said, what do you mean? She says, I know you. She said, you have millions of listeners and almost complete anonymity. It's exactly your fantasy. That is almost impossible to get. And I went, you do know me. How do you know me? But Jack and I talked about, the process. And I said, it's the process that I love. I love talking in front of a microphone. And Eric and I have talked about this a lot the last couple of weeks. I think it's important that people know the background of why we do this. It's like a drug. Every morning I wake up, I grab my phone, and it's like I want to know what's going on because I want to analyze it. And as I told Jack, this is more enjoyable. This is what I was meant to do because there isn't any part of this job I don't like. People say, well, geez, you have to pay attention to the news all the time. Yeah, as I said last week, that's my cocaine. And it is. It's an urge. I wake up, it's like, what's going on? What's going on? I got to know what's going on. I got to know what's going on. It's even, let's put it this way, to show you what kind of a drug it is, it supersedes getting coffee in the morning. Coffee is secondary to grabbing my phone and seeing, what in the world can I talk about tonight? So, and we talked about the process, that when you do something, do you do it for the recognition? Do you do it for the celebrity? Or do you do it because you absolutely love the process? And he said the same thing, too, with what he has what he has done. But he knows everybody. Getting in a great conversation. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was part of the Linda Ronstadt documentary. He was Linda Ronstadt's manager. I just can't remember his name, and Jack knows him really, really well. And just had a great conversation about him. I can't think of the guy's name now. Just popped out of my mind. But what a great conversation. And we, like I said, we did the same thing in school and went off in different directions. And he's had a very, very successful career. And the last caller just reminded me of that. And I said, okay, I got to mention it. When we talk about, people that are, hey, I'm an independent thinker. But and we talked about how you can vote for somebody and still disagree with them. That there's no problem. There seems to be this thing, I voted for him, so I have to defend this person no matter what, always. That's not true. You don't have to, and most people don't. They don't operate that way. Most people are independent thinkers, and sometimes it's scary to be an independent thinker if you're not in the media because you're afraid that you're going to be ostracized, even by people that agree with you, because there are people that are, nope, absolutely, I got to follow. Political idolatry still exists out there. I'm going to follow this person no matter what because I have to. They can do no wrong. Well, of course they can. All right, coming up, more of the audio and some really good audio from the PBS NPR hearing yesterday on their bias we call political activism. And I said it last hour, watching it, I just went, I don't care. Government money should not be funding any media at all. Yeah, they are political activists. Yeah, they are biased, but they're political activists more than even their bias. And some of these audio cuts we have here make that point so crystal clear. That more coming up, 866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Leased owner-operators should be aware of 4 common revenue myths, lest you fall into the trap of mistaking revenue for profit. Myth 1, concentrate on increasing revenue because costs will take care of themselves. This is not true, as costs are fundamental to the profit equation and the area where owners exert the most control to improve. Myth 2, more revenue per mile is the answer to all problems. Though carrier pay packages differ in structure, revenue per mile really doesn't change much from company to company. But there can be a big difference in miles, overall gross revenue, reimbursements, and fees. Myth 3, all you have to do to be successful is run a lot of miles. In reality, revenue is only half of the profit equation. Costs are the other half. It's possible to generate a lot of revenue, yet spend $1.10 to make every dollar. Myth 4, you can tell how well you're doing by the size of your settlement check. The settlement check is only a part of the success picture. Miles driven, loads hauled, conditions, mechanical problems, time off, and especially costs all have to be considered. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. I am here. Heard we had some technical problems there, so we are back now. Hopefully everything is good. But thank you for letting us know. We did know before. You let us know. I'll let us know. But hopefully everything is going fine and dandy now. All right, let's get to some audio. This is audio from Catherine Mayer of NPR yesterday in response to this question. Listen to this here as she claims that there's no bias that she knows of. That was her message all day, no bias that she knows of at NPR. Okay, let's see if that's accurate based on some analysis here.
Do you think that white people should pay reparations?
I have never said that, sir.
Yes, you did. You said it in January of 2020. You tweeted, yes, the North, yes, all of us, yes, America, yes, our original collective sin and unpaid debt, yes, reparations, yes, on this day.
I don't believe that was a reference to fiscal reparations, sir.
What kind of reparations was it a reference to?
I think it was just a reference to the idea that we all owe much to the people who came before us.
Trying to squirm out of it. Coming up following the bottom of the hour, we'll even have more of the things that she said where they talked about the fact that, where she said they're not biased. She goes, you have 87 registered Democrats, not a single Republican on your editor's board. And she said, well, I would agree that number is a concern. There's no bias, but it's 87-0. It's like, you can't make that case. You can't. Also coming up following the bottom of the hour, the president announcing auto tariffs. Back and forth this week, Monday and Tuesday, was talking about the fact that the reciprocal tariffs will be more lenient and not as reciprocal because people will hurt. And then he said the 25% tariffs are coming for the car industry. They're still trying to get all the carve-outs and everything else. Cox Automotive said that if there are not tariff carve-outs for automobile industry imports from Canada and Mexico, that the cost of U.S.-made vehicles would increase by about $3,000. That's the cost of U.S.-made vehicles would increase, while car prices for vehicles made in Canada or Mexico would rise by $6,000. The interesting thing is the message from the White House yesterday that, well, we put all these tariffs in, you may see their impact starting in the fourth quarter. It's putting a lot of eggs into, putting a lot of eggs into that one barrel there, because at that point we're already starting at, the primary season for the midterms. And the economy is going to be huge. A lot of talk yesterday about another district in states, was it Senate race in Pennsylvania, where Trump in that district was plus 16 and the Democrat won. And the concern about the economy. We've put the warning out there to all Republicans when it comes to pro-growth policies, whether it's the Reconciliation Act, whether it's tax cuts, whether it's tariffs. You have to understand, and I still don't think there's a recognition, which is amazing, because you won this election based on two things. You won it on the border, and you won it on prices. And I don't feel that there's a recognition from this administration how sensitive people are to that. And so we put out that warning. Other people have put out the warning. You've got to pay attention to that. That's why you won. And people eventually expect they're going to see lower prices. 866-90 Red Eye.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Eric has the morning off, but I am here. Thank you. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. All right, so the NPR PBS hearing yesterday about federal funding. And again, I watched parts of it, didn't watch the entire thing because for me, it doesn't matter whether there's a bias or not. I mean, it does matter that there's a bias. It does matter that it's not just a bias, that we believe it's political activism in the media. Our point would always be government shouldn't be funding media, even if I like the media. They just shouldn't be involved in it. Now, the public disagrees with me on it. A plurality of the public believes that the current funding to PBS and NPR should be there, which is one of the reasons that we doubt that DOGE will actually work, because the American public claims that they want cuts, but then they want things. We're not just talking about necessities. They want things like PBS subsidized. They want school lunches and breakfast subsidized. And you may say, yeah, but that's good. Fine, if you want it, we're never going to get the budget under control. That's simple. Well, waste and efficiency. Well, I think it's a waste and inefficient to send money up to D.C., to put it around the education department, the bureaucracy, and then send it back to you. Why isn't that something the state can take care of? If the money's coming from those localities to begin with, why does it go to the federal government? But we've talked about that a lot, but the same with PBS and NPR. But listen to this here as they talk about bias. Representative Timmons with the NPR CEO.
Did they come up in your job interview? Like, do you see a problem?
Congressman, thank you for the question. No, they never came up in my job interview.
You're a rabid progressive. And do you not think it's a problem that your political leanings make it seem to the American people that you're not biased and that you're not doing your job? Because you agree that your job is to have journalistic integrity, right?
Absolutely, but there is a strong firewall between the newsroom and anything that I
Let's
do.
talk about the newsroom. You have 87 registered Democrats, not a single Republican in your editor board. So, I mean, how does that work to give us the perception that you're doing your job of actually delivering unbiased information?
Well, I would agree with you that that number is a concern if it is accurate. I do believe that we need to have journalists who represent the full breadth of the American society so that we can report well for all Americans.
Well, I think that you are failing. I realize you've only been there for a year, but I just really think that while it is a small portion of your budget, you very much should expect to restructure your revenue streams, because I don't think that NPR is necessarily worth saving.
I mean, that's pretty self-evident. Yeah. Well, no, there's a firewall. Even though I'm a radical liberal, that's not the case with the newsroom. There's a firewall. All your editors are Democrats. There's not one Republican. You have 87 editors. Well, that would be a problem. No blank, Sherlock. Let's play more from yesterday. Here we go.
Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
It has evolved. Why did you tweet that?
I don't recall the exact context, sir, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay. Do you believe that America believes in black plunder and white democracy?
I don't believe that, sir.
You tweeted that in reference to a book you were reading at the time, apparently, The Case for Reparations.
I don't think I've ever read that book, sir.
You tweeted about it. You said you took a day off to fully read The Case for Reparations. You put that on Twitter in January of 2020.
Apologies, I don't recall that I did.
Okay.
I'd no doubt that your tweet there is correct, but I don't recall that.
Okay. Do you believe that white people in
By the way, does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe that you take a day off to read a book? An entire book? And on something that you wholeheartedly endorse in the summer in 2020, and you forget that you read the book? Is that believable? I can go all the way back. I remember I can't remember the name of the book, but the first political book I read was from Gary Hart. And I remember reading it and going, well, and it was supposed to be a book on economics. I just can't remember the title. This was like 1980 I read it. 81 maybe. But it was a book on Gary Hart. And maybe the reason I don't remember it is because I went, this is just all slogans. It's not, you're sounding like you're nice and this is your plan, but your plan is slogans. One of the books I read that made a huge impact on me was The Dream and the Nightmare, the 60s Legacy to the Underclass. Marvin Magnet, Professor Magnet wrote that. Now I believe he's with City Journal. That had a huge influence on me. I think I read that about 86, 87. So I don't buy the fact that you tweeted, I'm taking the day off to read an entire book, and then you forget about it a few years later. I don't buy any of what she's saying. Did they actually put her under oath? Because everything is, I don't remember that. I don't remember. I might have had that opinion on reparations, but I meant different reparations. Stop it. Let's continue here. Okay, we continue.
Okay. Do you believe that white people inherently feel superior to other races?
I do not.
You don't? You tweeted something to that effect. You said, I grew up feeling superior. Ha, how white of me. Why did you tweet that?
I think I was probably reflecting on what it was to grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
It sounds like you're saying that white people feel superior.
I don't believe that anybody feels that way, sir. I was just reflecting on my own experiences.
Do you think that white people should pay reparations?
I have never said that, sir.
Yes, you did. You said it in January of 2020. You tweeted, yes, the North, yes, all of us, yes, America, yes, our original collective sin and unpaid debt, yes, reparations, yes, on this day.
I don't believe that was a reference to fiscal reparations, sir.
What kind of reparations was it a reference to?
I think it was just a reference to the idea that we all owe much to the people who came before us.
That's a bizarre way to frame what you tweeted. Okay, how much reparations have you personally paid?
Sir, I don't believe that I've ever paid reparations.
Okay, it's just for everybody else.
I'm not asking anyone
Seems
to pay
to be what you're
reparations, sir.
suggesting. Do you believe that looting is morally wrong?
I believe that looting is illegal, and I refer to it as counterproductive. I think it should be prosecuted.
Do you believe
to the
it's
full extent of the
morally
law.
wrong, though?
Of course.
Of course. Then why did you refer to it as counterproductive? It's a very different way to describe it.
It is both morally wrong and counterproductive, as well as being
You
illegal.
tweeted, it's hard to be mad about protests in reference to the BLM protests, not prioritizing the private property of a system of oppression. You didn't condemn the looting. You said that it was counterproductive. NPR also promoted a book called In Defense of Looting. Do you think that that's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars?
I'm unfamiliar with that book, sir.
I want to go back. I want to play one portion of it here. I just want to go back here because I want to address one thing that she said here.
To grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
It sounds like you're saying that white people feel superior.
I don't believe that anybody feels that way, sir. I was just reflecting on my own experiences.
Do you think that
Right there. It's something that Eric and I have said. Because you asked the question, do you feel superior? Well, you made that comment that in your life you did. And it gets exactly to why the Democrats believe in identity politics. When I heard that yesterday, I went, there's a segment on the show. I could do a whole show on this. It's something that Eric and I have talked about many times before. And it was when we were always criticized, not as much anymore, but we were always criticized by the left. Anything that we believed was racist. And we said, why do they believe this? Why do you have, why does identity politics exist? Why is anything that we think, why do they automatically react and say it's racist? And then one day we went, wow, because they're racist. She just said it. She believed in her life that she was superior to blacks. They're racist. That's why they promote the identity politics. That's why they judge people by groups and not as individuals. It's how they think. I want to play that one more time because it is just it's so incredible that I'm like, wow. It's exactly what Eric and I have said for decades.
I grew up feeling superior. How white of me. Why did you tweet that?
I think I was probably reflecting on what it was to grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
There you go. Wow. See? It's white guilt. You now feel guilty for your racism. You believe you were superior. You said it. And this is why on the identity politics, Republicans have to tear it apart, as many of us in the conservative media has done. Why do they believe this? Republicans, you need to delve into this and attack it hard. Just don't say identity politics. Say what it is. You believe in judging people by groups and not individuals. It's like the audio we played yesterday from all the white liberals believing that voter ID laws are racist. And that black people, well, they just don't know the process of going to get identification. Then the interviewer went to East Harlem, talked to every single black who said, no, we have ID. Well, of course we know how to get ID. They were sort of indignant. Why are you even asking this question? You're making it sound like we're stupid. The left is racist. That's why they have identity politics. That's why it was so easy to go from the identity politics of racism, of judging people by groups and not individuals, right to the misogyny of the radical transgender movement. When you're a racist, it's not hard to move to being a misogynist. Amazing. It's also why they have no problem being pro-Hamas. It all fits in. Republicans need to pound this, and they need to pound it consistently, and they don't. They'll throw out identity politics is wrong. No, explain what it is. Explain what Neanderthal thinking is the base of the Democratic Party. It isn't a fringe group. It's mainstream in their party. Be loud about it. Explain it. Tell people who practice identity politics what it is. It's racism. Talk about the misogyny. I'm telling you, Eric and I were so happy when Riley Gaines came out and said misogyny. Oh, going back about a year ago, we're like, finally. And you have now the women activists that are against the misogyny of the radical transgender movement talking about it on a consistent basis. It's about time, because it is. It's horrendous. But understand, right there, that could be the audio cut of the week, because that was the admission, oh, I believe I'm a racist. That's why I have all the opinions I have. I believe in reparations because I'm a racist, and I'm guilty for my racism. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. Coming up on the top of the hour. This is just great. Democrats yesterday were using Mr. Rogers as their defense for taxpayer dollars going to NPR and PBS. The Media Research Center put together the best video ever. Okay, Democrats are defending that taxpayer money should be used, because of Mr. Rogers. And then they play an audio cut of Mr. Rogers and ask, do Democrats still hold the same opinion? Wait till you hear it. It is great. We just don't have time to play it right here at the moment, so we'll get to that. It's absolutely awesome. I've been dying laughing here since I played it a few minutes ago off the air. Plus, 64% of voters back Trump's plan to deport gang members. Half favor impeachment of the federal judge trying to block it, as now a 3-judge panel has blocked it by 2-1. We'll talk about that coming up also.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA, we are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. It's you and me. We are getting so many great audio cuts lately. I mean, it's a zoo out there. This is, I don't know, this is just awesome. This was put together by the Media Research Center. You had Representative Ro Khanna from California and others yesterday talking and using Mr. Rogers as a defense to fund PBS and NPR. All right? Saying this is worthwhile taxpayer dollars being spent. And so Media Research Center posted this and added some Mr. Rogers to this audio cut with the question, would Democrats say they endorse using taxpayer money for Mr. Rogers for this particular statement that he makes? But let's get to the back and forth and then how they inserted the Mr. Rogers into it. It is really funny.
Really don't know?
No, I really don't. I'm on the oath.
All of history. It's a successor to Mr. Rogers.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers, I know.
Okay. Are you familiar with his 1969 testimony?
I am.
He said, I want to quote, because it's one of my favorites. I studied this actually going to school. It's some of the most effective testimony in Congress. He said, I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
Boys are boys from the beginning. If you were born a boy, you stay a boy. Girls are girls right from the start. If you were born a girl, you stay a girl and grow up to be a lady. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Only girls can be the mommies. Only boys can be the daddies. Yes, sir. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine.
So how many Democrats agree with that message from Mr. Rogers, and therefore that is your defense for taxpayer dollars being used for PBS? That's the greatest. That's the greatest ever. I mean, it really, really is. That's just awesome. We need to save that one. That one gets saved. The other thing that was being brought up, Representative Insanity, Jasmine Crockett, my congressperson. Now, you're very familiar with it. I'll keep saying that for a while because we know we have new listeners all the time, and I get so many great comments. Really? You need to run against her. You know, I had a buddy of mine My buddy Jerry listens in Tarpon Springs, Florida, right outside Tampa. And we were talking the other day. What was? Oh, wait a minute. I forgot what he said. No. Oh, wait a minute. I'll think about it in a second. It was something really good. We'll get to it in a second, but I want to play this audio cut first because, the whole Jasmine Crockett. He brought up the person running against her next year and said he'll win. I said, no, he won't. No, I said, no. The district is like 80%. You're talking about a gerrymandered district. This is a gerrymandered district. It's like 80% Democrat. So she could say anything she wants and get reelected. But she was out and cursing, BS, the whole free speech aspect, that this is about free speech. Of course it's not. And this is Representative Eric Burleson going after the whole free speech argument, which is a bogus argument. Republicans say they're for free speech, yet they're not for taxpayer funding for PBS. It's got nothing to do with free speech. Absolutely nothing. But they depend on people being ignorant. But here it is.
It was said that we're attacking free speech. This is paid, this is state-sponsored speech. And the very reason why we have these witnesses before us today isn't because they're totally being funded or completely being funded. We're not bringing in Disney Channel in here, right? We're not bringing in the National Geographic, right, for their content. The reason why we're having this conversation is because we are funding you, and because we're funding you, the taxpayers get to have an opportunity to ask, why are we funding some of this content that they might disagree with? Right?
Yeah, no, that's completely right. In fact, I think that PBS and NPR, but especially PBS, will thrive on the membership model. They keep saying it's such a small percentage. Well, if it's the public funding, if it's such a small percentage, then no problem.
And again, they talked a lot about the bias of it. It's we've said it's not bias anymore. It's political activism. But that isn't really the case. I don't care whether – I don't want my taxpayer dollars to go and fund media that I want. Media that I want can be self-sustaining. It can make a profit. You look at the history of conservative talk radio and even the audience it has today. I'm going to guess the audience is still, 50 million a week, as it has, remained steady for ages. Well, that's why it's there, is because it's profitable. And it's a model that works very, very, very well. The only reason I would never want public funding. Oh, we want public funding for conservative talk radio. Are you nuts? No way. We already had a deal over the years. I remember when we worked for Disney, it was like, but you guys are owned by Disney, and so you're being told what to say. And that wasn't true when we worked for Disney. They didn't say ABC. ABC then was Cap Cities and then part of Disney. They left us alone completely. But that's always out there. And then it's like, okay, well, you guys are doing things that your sponsors want. Not true. But if that is out there and that's a concern, will there even be more of a concern if the government was funding us, even part of funding us? People would say, well, I don't know if I can trust you because you're getting funded by the government. So now that Obama is in office and Eric is always talking about hope and change, is that a subliminal message from Eric that we need to believe in hope and change and Obama? I like that. That was good. Let me pat myself on the back for that one. And so, no, I wouldn't want it. I want to work in commercial media. That's where I want to work. If there's a nonprofit out there, that's fine. Nonprofit that is funded through memberships. If corporations wish to sponsor you, that's fine. I don't want government in it. And I know part of it is the taxpayer has a say, which they do. The taxpayer has a say of content that we feel is objectionable because it's taxpayer dollars, I don't even want to go that far. I just want to go to this point. No taxpayer funding for NPR, no taxpayer funding for PBS, no taxpayer funding for Red Eye Radio. See, I covered it across the board. If we don't get it, you don't get it. And if you get it, we still don't want it. And that's the truth. So, but Jasmine Crockett was out there. Free speech, free speech, free speech, free speech. All right. We know you're an idiot and you don't understand the First Amendment. The First Amendment has nothing to do about pulling taxpayer dollars from funding the media. The First Amendment, when it comes to what she thinks she's talking about, is the government punishing people for their speech. That's what it's about. Or government censoring, as we saw with Twitter, the government involvement in intimidating and censoring and intimidating to private companies to censor their content. Those are free speech issues. The funding, no. Pulling the funding, no. Absolutely nothing to do with free speech. You are not owed taxpayer dollars. And then if the taxpayer says, no, we don't want to do this anymore, you can't come crying and saying, we're being denied our right to free speech. And that's what the members of the House, including Jasmine Crockett, were saying yesterday. She's clueless. She really does have the mentality of a 3-year-old. She really does. I've really never seen somebody that idiotic. You know, the funny thing is I got a response. And I did answer, good point, where I said, if you see her, that everything she's doing now is an act. Because if you see her a year ago, she didn't talk like that. She didn't act like that. Her expressions weren't like this. This is performance art, what she's involved in. And go and the listeners say, no, you're wrong. She's not acting now. She was acting back then. It's like, good point. You may have a point there. But one way or another, this is performance art that she's involved in. But couldn't play the audio cut because of her cursing, because now that's her MO. I'm going to curse. And if I constantly curse, well, then I'll be more effective in what I do. By the way, I don't want cursing I would suggest not to curse anybody in government, and that includes Peter Hegseth, who did it on X yesterday. Don't need to do that to get your message across. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. I don't. All right, I did get a few requests immediately. Could you post that on your X page? Could I post this? And this is from the PBS NPR hearing where Republicans want to pull the funding and talking about the bias of NPR. And this is, I'm going to play it again because it's worth playing again, isn't it? This is so special. I know we just played it 10 minutes ago, but it's worth playing again. Representative Ro Khanna on with one of the guests that were testifying yesterday on PBS, and they got into talking about Mr. Rogers and Ro Khanna making the case, that Mr. Rogers is good. And so Media Research Center played that audio and then added some Mr. Rogers and saying, would Democrats endorse this video from Mr. Rogers? This is just great. Here it is. Here we go.
really don't know?
No, I really don't. I'm on the oath.
All of history. It's a successor to Mr. Rogers.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers, I know.
Okay. Are you familiar with his 1969 testimony?
I am.
He said, I want to quote, because it's one of my favorites. I studied this actually going to school. It's some of the most effective testimony in Congress. He said, I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
Boys are boys from the beginning. If you were born a boy, you stay a boy. Girls are girls right from the start. If you were born a girl, you stay a girl and grow up to be a lady. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Only girls can be the mommies. Only boys can be the daddies. Yes, sir. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine.
I never thought for the life of me I would ever be playing Mr. Rogers on the show, ever. And that it would ever be relevant to any topic that we are discussing. I, again, was 100% wrong. And I did, due to popular demand, I did post it on my X page at Gary Red Eye 1, if you want to check it out, at Gary Red Eye 1. Did somebody should have done it at the hearing. If there's a hearing in the Senate, Ted Cruz, if you're listening, could you play that, Ted Cruz? If the Senate's going to do the same thing here in the next couple of days, could you please play that? Because that would be great. We would like to get a show of hands from Democrats because you've been promoting Mr. Rogers. Do you believe that Mr. Rogers should have been promoting this? Not should have. He's not, alive anymore. But should Mr. Rogers have been promoting this? And do you think taxpayer dollars should go for this kind of message from PBS? Or ask one of the witnesses, because that is just too good. So at Gary Red Eye 1, if you want to share that, play it over and over again, because it is funny. So it really, like I said, it comes down to what we've talked about. It played a ton of audio cuts yesterday. And also the Senate was talking about censoring and what free speech and censoring. Jonathan Turley gave some comments on it, so we'll hear from him on that. Also, a new poll out, 64% of voters back Trump's plan to deport Venezuelan gang members. Half face impeachment for the federal judge trying to block it. We'll have that survey coming out. You saw that a 3-judge panel rejected it 2-1. And I was reading a couple of articles that said nowhere do they talk about whether they have standing to make any decision or not. They don't have the standing to do it. So it's, whether the courts have the standing even involved in it, or whether that is just a authority that the executive branch has been given by Congress to do it. So we'll get to that coming up here in a little bit. Plus, God, there's just so much great audio. We'll have audio from the Democratic lawmaker who suggests that females are athletically equal to males. A Pennsylvania Democratic state senator gave testimony that females are athletically equal to males. Oh, they're not going to change. We've talked a lot about this. They are not going to change. They don't wish to change. The radicals still dominate. Oh, Oh, I got it. I completely forgot about it. I blanked it out. There's so much on my mind. The House voted yesterday. We got to talk about this. The House voted yesterday and approved no taxes on Social Security. I may talk about nothing else if that's the case, since I'll be collecting in a few months. That's the only thing I want. Why? Because all I want is what's coming to me. All I want is my fair share. I saw that. There wasn't a lot on it. I saw that the vote was there. I haven't seen any articles on it. I got to find out where that vote actually is going. What did that mean that they voted on that? That wasn't part of the reconciliation bill.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Okay, all right. Well, I'd seen it on social media, and I don't know when I did. Was it before I went to sleep or after I woke up? And there was just so much. And I saw it, but I didn't see any stories written on it. I just saw it on social media, and it went viral on social media, but I didn't see any stories on it. The House just voted to pass a budget resolution backed by President Trump, which will include $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, such as no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. That's what I saw. And it was clear in the community notes that isn't true. All right, so nothing mentioned no tax on tips, overtime, or Social Security in this bill, which basically recommends. It doesn't mandate the cuts. It recommends what the cuts should be. So that's why it wasn't a big story. Because I thought there'd be a huge story. When I saw it, I went, why isn't that the only thing the Republicans are talking about, especially on a day like yesterday? Well, then let's get moving. And I don't care. I just want the stuff for me. I don't care about the tax on, I don't care about no taxes on tips or overtime. Social Security. I'm an old man. I need to survive. I want mine. Somebody's going to believe me there. I'm going to get hate mail for that. But I still wonder, and I've never seen one article. It's something that Eric and I have talked about. The no taxes on Social Security seems pretty simple. You know, if you, because at one point there were no taxes on Social Security. When did that stop? I think 80 or 81. Because you can look at that and say, okay, that's definitely different income. You know, that's retirement income. That's a retirement subsidy. It's money you paid into in supposedly a different account, but paid separately outside of your taxes in the FICA, you and your employer. And so it wasn't taxed before. It's not, understand what I say, it's not earned income from a workplace. Because I know if I just say earned income, what do you mean? I earned it, I put in. I understand. That's why they call it an entitlement, because you're entitled to it. But on the taxes and on tips, and I haven't seen anyone talk about this except us. Maybe they have, and I missed it, but I do a lot of reading, a lot of scanning everywhere, and I haven't seen anybody bring it up except us, and that's on the taxes on tips and the taxes on overtime. How do you, it's income, it's work income, it's employment income. How do you separate that constitutionally from other work income or other investment income that has been viewed in the precedent shows that it's the exact, they're all the exact same thing? How do you, because when you look at the 14th Amendment, when you look at income taxes now, you know, you can be charged, you know, they can set up a system where you get certain deductions and everything else, but when it comes to your net income or your adjusted gross income, everybody pays the same amount if they make the same amount. And so will they be able to constitutionally get through that by saying overtime can be deducted because that's more than a 40-hour week? And then if you do that, somebody who was on salary and worked 60 hours, could they sue? And on tips are income. Have always been income. If you're talking about most people who make tips, it's probably not billionaires. And so you're talking middle to lower middle income from the majority of people that probably make tips. Well, then you've got a ton of people who may be in that same classification who also look at it and say, for example, somebody who makes $30,000 a year and they make $30,000 a year, combination of their actual rate of pay per hour and their tips, and they make $30,000. Well, somebody else makes $30,000 in a job and they work 40 hours a week. They're not going to get the tax break you do. Legally, how do you get through that? And nobody has addressed that when it comes to the actual income tax about what is constitutional and what is not. And so I'm really interested to see what the legal arguments are. I just haven't seen anybody bring them up yet. So, but unfortunately, that should have been the clue. It was all over social media, but there wasn't a story on it. Couldn't find a story anywhere. So it'd be interesting to see if they can get that through, though. But I think the easiest would be the Social Security. Because at one point, you didn't pay taxes on Social Security. And I think now it's what you pay up to. You still get a discount. I think the most you pay, depending on your income, is 85% on the income that you get from Social Security, from what I'm told. So we'll see where that goes. Meanwhile, in other stories, we'll have this audio coming up. Let's read the story. Pennsylvania Democratic State Senator Lindsay Williams gave controversial testimony at the state capitol on Wednesday while opposing a bill that would ban trans athletes from girls' sports. Williams, in prepared remarks ahead of the committee vote on the Save Women's Sports Act, suggested that female athletes are physically comparable to male athletes and do not face biological disadvantages. I want all girls to know that there are elected officials like me who believe female bodies are just as strong and fast and capable of male bodies. I want all girls to know that there are elected officials like me who would never underestimate your ability to beat a boy at their own sport, because that's what the premise of this bill assumes, that female bodies are less than male bodies, that girls are at a disadvantage and can't possibly compete against boys, even though girls do it every day. Williams went on to suggest that the issue of biological males participating in girls' and women's sports is a made-up issue. What kind of drugs are they doing in Pennsylvania? For what reason other than political gain are we spending time and taxpayer dollars on a completely made-up issue? I love this next sentence. Williams' argument that females are physically just as capable as males has been disputed by experts. I love it. We're going to promote our self-misogyny by saying you're discriminating against women because you won't mandate that women must compete against boys. That you are, in essence, saying that women are inferior, and that in itself is the misogyny and sexism that exists from those who oppose a radical transgender movement. Yeah, that's it. Try to sell that one. Wow. And they quote here, Dr. Deborah So, author of The End of Gender, has discussed biological differences in many interviews. Quote, individuals who are born male are on average larger, stronger, and faster than individuals born female, and even those trans individuals who are on hormone therapy, so they are suppressing testosterone or on estrogen therapy. This does not override the structural foundation. It also does not change muscle mass or muscle strength after a year of being on hormones, typically the guideline used by many sports. But I would argue it does not override the advantages that someone has from being born male, of course. I mean, it's self-evident. That's why you can look at this and go, well, what kind of drugs are they doing? I mean, are they really, really good drugs? It's not fair. It's absolutely heartbreaking when you listen to the girls and women who are competing against these individuals. They know before the competition starts what the outcome is going to be. They know they don't have a fair chance. It doesn't matter how hard they train. They know they're not going to be able to reach that level. And even if you look at the average non-athlete male, depending on the sport, a non-transgender male, he will dominate even over elite female competitors. Wow. The United Nations released study findings saying that nearly 900 biological females have fallen short of victories and championships because they've been defeated by transgender athletes in the United States. The study, Violence Against Women and Girls in Sports. This is the UN? Really? Intellectual honesty? Said more than 600 athletes did not medal in more than 400 competitions in 29 sports, totaling over 890 medals. A recent New York Times survey found that the majority of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, don't think transgender athletes should be permitted to compete in women's sports. They're not going to change, though. Remember, every single Democrat in Congress, in the Senate and the House, except for 2 in the House, every single one, except 2, voted for men to be in women's private spaces and for men to compete athletically against women, and for men to define what a woman is. I mean, the hatred of women, the misogyny, the self-misogyny that exists, the Democrats promote. The ignoring the evidence that is self-evident, that is so crystal clear. No, just not happening, just not happening, just not happening, just not happening. Well, then I suggest that you take that same opinion and apply it to gravity. And then try to fly off that bridge. Good God. These people, they're just insane. But the best part is women are speaking up about it now. Eric and I were talking about it, 10 years ago, and we felt like we were alone. And people would call us and say, you guys are, this isn't going to go anywhere. They're really never going to allow men to compete against women. They're not going to allow men in women's bathrooms. To hell they're not. We were right. They did. Now nobody says that anymore. So now they have to be absolutely delusional from the Democrat side. Oh, no. Why are you bigoted against women? Why don't you believe that women can't play football against men? You bigot, you sexist, you don't think that women can play football against men? You believe that the top male athletes can beat the top women athletes? Why, you sexist, you misogynist, you're the misogynist. That means me. Because you believe that women should compete against women. All right. Keep trying to sell that one. 866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. Here it is. Here's the audio. This is in the Pennsylvania Senate. Democratic Senator Lindsay Williams explaining that she voted against a bill to keep biological males out of female sports. She says she believes women athletes are just as strong as male.
I want all girls to know that there are elected officials like me who believe female bodies are just as strong, as fast and capable as male bodies. Because notably, this bill only seeks to ban trans girls from playing sports, not trans boys. I want all girls to know that there are elected officials like me who would never underestimate your ability to beat a boy at their own sport. Because that's what the premise of this bill assumes, that female bodies are less than male bodies, that girls are at a, quote, automatic disadvantage and can't possibly compete against boys.
So the reason I'm a self-misogynist is because I care. My God, these people are absolutely crazy. I mean, they're nuts. Absolutely nuts. Because I care. You want evidence that she's wrong? You know, the PGA, any woman could qualify. The PGA, the Professional Golfers Association. Women are not banned from playing in the PGA. Nope. Any woman, if they could qualify, could play and be in tournaments. How many women have won a PGA tournament? One of the major reasons, men hit the ball farther.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. It's you and me. You know, after playing that audio from the Pennsylvania state senator, and she said that men should compete against women and women should compete against men because women are not weaker in any way physically than men. And so she cares. How dare you insult women by doing it? Of course, it's not insulting. It's simply looking at reality. Nobody is saying when they say women should be able to play their own sports against other women, nobody is saying that women are inferior human beings to men. Some men might believe that, but for the most part, the majority of men who deal with the majority of women every single day know that's not true. So you look at this and you say, why the continuing delusions from the left? What is it? And I know a lot of conservatives that genuinely are frustrated because the left to them makes no sense anymore. I hear more from Republicans, conservatives who say, look, I like everybody. I don't hate people that voted for Biden, but I can't communicate with them. It's impossible to communicate. And if I can't communicate, how can you even think of, because that's what we're told, you need to compromise. How can I compromise with delusions? How do you compromise with those, for example, in the radical transgender movement? Where's the compromise there? There is no compromise. And I was reading some different articles from American Thinker, and Elliot Patterson, the author, had an article from yesterday. We can cure democracy, but can we cure stupid? And I just got to read a couple of paragraphs because this is great stuff. But you can see that Elliot's wondering the same thing. And you can tell there's a frustration there. And there is a frustration with conservatives because conservatives that I know connect the dots. There's critical thinking. And if they don't connect the dots, by the way, I'm not saying all Republicans are conservative because they're not. There are Republicans that at times don't connect the dots. There are populists that don't connect the dots. But the beauty about conservatism is that that's almost a requirement. You got to connect the dots. You've got to have critical thinking skills. Things have to work. One of the things that we've always talked about is there's a government out there. We had a government the last 4 years that did everything to harm the American public. The things that they were doing did not help. They hurt. Politicians can be wrong all the time, and there seems to be no penalty to pay. They may, not be able to win next time in office, but the Democratic Party still gets 45 to 47% of the vote right now. And we go over their main issues, and it's like none of it makes sense. And the radical transgender movement is what leads. Think about this. The Neanderthal thinking of identity politics. They still judge people by groups and not individuals. That's a frustrating thing for us conservatives. And you sit there and you say the autonomy of the individual, free will. You coming up yourself with the ability to think for yourself. I'm very close to my great-nephew. I was very close to my nephew, very close to my great-nephew. Great kid. Opposite of where I was at my time in high school right now. At 16 years of age, he's got so much better direction than I ever had, a much better work ethic than I ever had. I was lazy and wanted to get out of everything. And I told him, I said, because he knows, my nephew knew, my great-nephew knew. I remember one time my great-nephew, and this goes back 30 years ago, and if my nephew is Jamaican Irish, so he has darker skin than I have. And my dad, for some reason, was driving down the road. My dad, driving down the road with him in there, and he was listening to my talk show, and somebody called me a racist. It always bothered my nephew that I was called a racist. I remember him telling me, he goes, why did they call you a racist? You're not a racist. And it was the cutest thing. He goes, because you're not a racist. You love me. Oh, I get goosebumps whenever I think about that moment. But I also, because it was so adorable and great that he said that to me. But it was horrible that he had to go through that. Because he knows I'm not a racist. He knows I don't care. I don't care what your color skin is. That's so damn stupid. It's ridiculous. Oh, the color of your... yep, I'm a Bubba, and the color of your skin determines the fact that I am superior to you. Yep. Yeah, that's it. And so it's so ridiculous. So for an entire party to endorse identity politics, endorse the racism of DEI and critical race theory, the misogyny of the radical transgender movement, and what was going on with the radical transgender movement, the intimidation, the threats, the bullying against women. My God. And it's mainstream in the party. And so Elliot Patterson wrote, for 4 long years during which our democracy was under constant peril, one might say the November election cured that crisis, at least for now, returning the American voter and the American values to center stage. Zealots of the left, however, continue their tired course of accusation and cancellation. It is staggering how blind to election results and deaf to the voices of voters they seem to be. Wokeness may be in retreat, but this core of liberalism still included many in legacy media, continue their ranting about existential threats and trying to shame us into shedding crocodile tears over illegal immigrants. They have doubled down on their playbook, even though its tenets have been hollowed out, proven false again and again and again. The failing mindset was perfectly captured by novelist Saul Bellow, an early victim of political correctness. This is a great quote here. Here's a quote. A great deal of intelligence, he observed, can be invested in ignorance when the need for illusion is great. Wow. A great deal of intelligence can be invested in ignorance when the need for illusion is great. What we have been witnessing is proof of the Bellow equation. The left even more desperately clings to its illusions, and its investment in ignorance soars. Their conjured existential crises have evolved from global warming to climate change to Russia collusion, Trump 45, then Trump 47, now expanding to include Elon Musk, every challenge to the deep state, or whatever executive order happens to be signed today. I recalled being puzzled long ago at the leftist declarations of certain of my acquaintances, wondering what sources their hyper-educated intellects were consulting to support their emotional pronouncements. Gradually, I realized it wasn't about their words or thoughts, it was about their emotion. They were not using their once quested intellect to get to the truth. They were just consulting their newly discovered elitist tribe, coached by legacy media, to see what cue card they should read. They were not exploring and processing knowledge. They were just mechanically reciting leftist sound loops dressed up with Ivy League syntax. You hear a lot of accusation and derision in those loops, but seldom do you hear the words of cognitive engagement, words that reflect a general interest in discovery or the shared advancement of knowledge that until now drove human progress. And this is the part where he writes here, because this is the part that frustrates a lot of us. For years, many of us wanted to believe that this was something that was just temporary. No longer. At this point, the left's deliberate lack of interest in the truth can only be called willful ignorance. It is impossible, absolutely impossible, to embrace the 1619 Project or claim that Winston Churchill caused World War II without deliberately ignoring actual accessible history. Oh, and the same with identity politics and the misogyny of the radical transgender movement. Perhaps the most blatant examples are the zealots' pronouncements that grammar, spelling, and math are constructs of white supremacism, particularly disturbing since impressionable students are being indoctrinated with this ignorance. Too many of our institutions are entrenching stupidity and proliferating it throughout society, spreading not just a disregard for truth, but the inability to articulate clear, rational thought. And if you don't understand that this embrace of ignorance underlies the plummeting scores in our schools, the new national report card shows our students failing math and reading, the abysmal decline of media, the climate myths, and the tendency of Democrats to act like screaming banshees instead of offering substantive dialogue, then you need to put down your phone and go read a book. Responsible adults pursue questions to get to the truth. When did these people stop asking questions? We are born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid, said Benjamin Franklin. The left has been working very hard indeed. The essential ingredients for their stubborn ignorance is narcissism, which was on blatant display in the left's 2024 presidential campaign and their recent conclave to baptize new leaders. Their toxic mixture of ignorance and ego lets them pretend they know everything. With bizarre confidence, they treat ignorance as a virtue, not a political handicap. They pat each other on the back and deem themselves to be true emperors, but not one is wearing any clothes. It's a sad commentary on our culture that we have to talk about an epidemic of ignorance, but we can no longer dismiss this syndrome as a mere irritant. The left doesn't simply make themselves irrelevant. They're infecting our institutions with the virus. They dumb down public discourse, which means that those who incessantly cry wolf and shrieks of threat to democracy and constitutional crisis, they are the real threat to democracy. Wow. Anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities, warned Voltaire. Willful stupidity is toxic to a healthy democracy and ultimately our way of life. Jefferson was not speaking lightly when he observed that a civilization cannot be ignorant and free at the same time. Do we need a reminder? Civilization is not something other people do. We all participate. We all share the responsibility for it. But really, just a fascinating article. His last line is, before he was martyred by the Nazi regime, Dietrich Bonhoeffer recognized the terrible truth behind his faith. We have more to fear from stupid people than evil ones. Great countries, like great people, can be done in by ignorance. America won't be great again if we don't push back against the stupidity. And finally, what he says here, I'm going to read this line here. I don't want to forget about this. This is great. No off-the-shelf cure exists for stupidity. It can't be reversed by executive order. With rare but wonderful exceptions, it cannot be mitigated by a single teacher. The antidote has much to do with thinking for yourself and cajoling those around you to do the same. Don't be shaped or led by the ignorant. Push back with facts. Stop supporting the elite universities, which have become incubators for ignorance. Mock the narcissism that breeds it. Let the legacy media die their well-deserved death. Stop being silent when you encounter stupidity leaking out of your local schools. What a great article. Elliot Pattison, and that's from American Thinker. And the headline of the article, you can just put AmericanThinker.com and it comes up. We can cure democracy, but can we cure stupid? But you can tell the frustration. It's a frustration that we all feel. You can't even communicate with the Democrat anymore. You can't communicate because they're nuts on the issues. They're insane. There is no rational thought behind the way that they think. There is no rational thought to the racism of identity politics, the misogyny of the radical transgender movement, their denial of things that are self-evident. For example, when the border. Biden, we'd all dealt with that. It's ridiculous. And it's frustrating. And the only way you can do it, you got to keep pounding it wherever it happens. And you cannot let up because they're not going to let up. The radical left will not let up on this. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. In order to manage speed, you need to understand the 4 factors involved in stopping a vehicle. Perception distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time you see a hazard until your brain recognizes it. The perception time for an alert driver is approximately 3/4 of a second. Reaction distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time your brain tells your foot to move from the accelerator until your foot hits the brake pedal. The average driver has a reaction time of 3/4 of a second. Brake lag distance also needs to be taken into account. When operating a vehicle with air brakes, it takes about half a second for the mechanical operation to take place. Finally, braking distance is the distance it takes a vehicle to stop once the brakes are applied. Braking distance is affected by the weight, length, and speed of the vehicle, as well as road condition. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. I'm here. Coming up following the bottom of the hour, we'll hear some audio, some great audio, in fact, on the hearing that was held the other day on free speech and censorship. And Democrat Jonathan Turley, I think he's still a Democrat. I wonder if he changed last November, because he's a lifelong Democrat, but he's one of the loudest speakers at the Democratic Party. Is nuts where they're going. So we'll get to that coming up here in a little bit. This is interesting. Speaker Mike Johnson huddled privately with House Judiciary Committee members on Tuesday afternoon for what was described as a brainstorming session on how to take on activist judges blocking Donald Trump's agenda. We'll get to more of this article coming up following the bottom of the hour. What I see is it really doesn't matter if you're huddling. You got to get 60 votes in the Senate. There's no way you're going to get that right now. But we'll get to that coming up and more.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. I don't. I'm not bitter. No, he's doing stuff for the show. He's out of town, so that's all good. This is audio from 2 days ago, and the Senate hearing on censorship and free speech. And one of the guests, one of the people testifying, was Jonathan Turley, constitutional law professor, lifelong Democrat. From what we know, don't know if he's changed in the last year or two, but one of the biggest pro-free speech people out there, and talks about that, we've had anti-free speech movements in our history, but under the Biden administration, we have never, ever in the history of the nation seen one like we just went through. Here's Jonathan Turley.
We never had that debate during COVID, not a robust debate of the masks, the 6-foot rule, natural immunities. That's the cost of free speech. It has a direct impact on American citizens.
Professor Turley, to what extent should government-funded institutions and government-funded non-profit organizations be involved in defining and combating misinformation and disinformation?
I would put that near, if not at zero. Many of the terms we use today actually were used at the beginning of the Republic when the First Amendment was designed. These are not new arguments. Free speech is something that's easier to behold at a distance. But when you ask people, you talk about the McCarthy period, and they're horrified. And then you say, well, how about the censoring, blacklisting, throttling today? And they go, oh, well, that's different. We have to fight disinformation. These are the same voices. They've been with us for ages. They're making the same arguments. Everyone uses as an excuse that this is why I should be able to silence my neighbors. And it costs not just politically. When you talk about COVID, I spoke at the University of Chicago, and most of the people that signed the Great Barrington statement were there. And I asked many of these scientists who have been vindicated in many of their views, how many of you have been restored to your positions? How many of you that were fired were invited back? Zero. And the point I'm only raising is when we talk about the cost to free speech, we never had that debate during COVID, not a robust debate of the masks, the 6-foot rule, natural immunities. That's the cost of free speech. It has a direct impact on American citizens.
So that creates a good picture of the grave risks involved concerning the long-term consequences of allowing and even encouraging increased collaboration between government entities, big tech firms, and academic institutions, insofar as they can do what Ms. Hemingway described a moment ago, of creating a kind of a collusive understanding and agreement in advance. We're all going to agree that this is the truth, right? What are the long-term consequences of that happening, that kind of collusion between things like academic institutions, government entities, and government-funded entities, and big tech firms?
Yeah, that's something that I think really has to be kept in mind. We've had anti-free speech movements in our history. We've never seen anything like this one. We've never seen a coalition of corporations, academia, the media, the government join together in this way. And it succeeded to an extent that I find truly chilling. And they've had a setback. They've lost X. Apparently Meta is stepping back from some of its censorship. And so they're going old school. They're turning to the EU. They're turning to countries like Brazil to start to use government power. And this fight is just beginning.
You describe what I think a lot of Americans intuitively understand, which is stuff goes back to the 1790s. It's not as though modern technology has presented us with purely unique sui generis questions. There are some challenges that come up, but the fundamental question of the government's ability to censor, those legal issues haven't changed. There's nothing about the technology that obliterates or creates a carve-out from the First Amendment.
Absolutely true. Eric and I always put this message out to anybody who may be listening, and, you haven't defined what you are politically. That happens to a lot of people. I mean, you know what you think, but you've never articulated it in your head. And I know that's true because I went through that. I was always conservative, but I didn't think about it. I didn't articulate it in my head. And so when I was forced back in 1989 to be a radio talk show host, it scared the daylights out of me because, voting a certain way, living a certain way, and then having to articulate it in public is a huge leap. You don't know what it is until somebody puts you in front of a microphone and says, all right, you've got 2 hours, go. When I mentioned I talked to my buddy Jack the other day, who I went to college with, and we were talking about our early days in college radio, and I said I remember the first song that I played at the college radio station, Mott the Hoople, Death May Be Your Santa Claus. And the reason I played the song, not that I was a huge Mott the Hoople fan at that moment, but I needed a long song because I wasn't ready yet to talk in front of the microphone. And the microphone, the radio station, went just to the cafeteria where it was so loud nobody was listening. And forget about articulating what I thought about how the world works or economics works or anything like that, or politics. It was introducing the next song. It took me 3 songs. The song would end. I'd open up the microphone and go, nothing came out. Play the next song. 3 times in a row at a college radio station that was, again, going to the cafeteria. So, yeah, it's tough for people to do it, but in this day and age, you have to do it. But one thing that Eric and I've always said to young people, to anybody, don't believe what we say just because you like the way that we present it. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld that said, people mistake funny for being right, or being personable, that means you're right, or a sense of confidence, and that's an indication that you're right. And it isn't. The only thing is the substance of your argument and whether you're telling the truth or not. Now, you can have a good personality. You can be humorous and still at the same time tell the truth. But that isn't the reason, and a lot of people sometimes, mistake that. But if you're someone who has not yet figured out where you are, look and ask yourself this question: why do most conservatives, including us, conservative libertarians, why do we promote the fact, in fact, we're disappointed when a liberal is taken off the air. We want, in fact, it was 2006 where Eric and I look and say, all right, that's when the Democratic Party started opening up and telling people what they really thought. They weren't trying to move to the middle. We want that. Jasmine Crockett and her insanity. I don't want to shut her up. I want her to keep on talking. I want people to know exactly what she believes. So ask yourself this question. If you have not figured out where you are politically, simply ask yourself the question, why do most conservatives, why do we, just don't take it past Eric and myself, why do we absolutely want the left to never be censored, and they wish to censor us? Why? Because they know they can't make the argument unless they shut the other side up. It's not hard. That's why they do it. And it's wrong. And Turley is right. We've never seen this ever, where you have the government, academia, the media, all gather together to try to take away free speech in the United States, trying to censor ideas, trying to censor anything that they don't like. And probably the biggest example in history, because this is going to go down in the history books. What happened during COVID? They're going to look at this 100 years from now and say, "Really, that happened in the United States?" On COVID, why? Why did they do this? Why would they censor if people if people were getting sick and there was this virus? Why wasn't there the natural curiosity of everyone, irrespective of the political party, to hunt down to find out where it came from and then be open to all ideas? Why was the science out there and it actually existed and they tried to hide it? Why did they close down schools and hide the truth of COVID's effect on children? Why didn't they tell the entire truth on the vaccines and let you as an individual decide what to do? Interesting that Turley brought up the Great Barrington Declaration, that anyone that was a part of that who signed the Great Barrington Declaration, which came out in October of 2020, if you don't remember it, and it said, what the government's doing is wrong. The government is wrong on what they're doing and how they're handling COVID. And he said every single one of those people who were penalized or lost their jobs, not one was reinstated after it was proven that the government was wrong and was attempting to censor the truth. And who was doing it? Wasn't conservatives. It was liberals. And it was wrong. And it was horribly wrong. And Jonathan Turley, lifelong Democrat, understands where it comes from and how frightening it is. And the people that enacted this censorship and the threats and the intimidation and the firing, none of them have been held accountable. And they don't even want to have a discussion on it. Let's just forget that ever existed. I find it interesting how they're saying, all right, they realize they can't do it. The United States has moved in a different direction, so now let's go right to Europe and Brazil or whatever. Let's go to the countries that are more willing now to just say forget it to free speech. And so I'm so glad that he said that, because he made it clear. And you could hear it in the urgency in his voice. Never been done in American history like we saw. Never been done like that, ever, to censor Americans. And I know you may say, well, Great Barrington Declaration was in October of 2020. Trump was president. Didn't matter. The bureaucracy was not Republican. The bureaucracy was not liberal. The people trying to shut down the discussion on the truth, on ideas, were all liberal, all involved in the Democratic Party, all part of the liberal media. They don't want any other ideas, and they don't want ideas that are the truth if it differs from their delusions. 866-98-RED-I.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-I on Red Eye Radio.
We are Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric Harley has the morning off. It's you and me. And don't forget, download our Red Eye Radio app today. Our newly updated Red Eye Radio app. Our show ends an hour from now. After our show ends, our app has the entire show, which becomes our podcast. So a lot of people wake up at, halfway through the show, end of the show, catch the last hour, whatever. And if you want to catch more of what we did, like the first hour, you can listen to it on our podcast. And if you can't listen to one of our great radio stations while we're on the air, we stream all 5 hours on our Red Eye Radio app. And coming up following the top of the hour, if you haven't heard the Mr. Rogers audio cut, we're going to play it again, because it's we'll play it again, and we'll tell you where you can find it, because it was just genius. So we'll get to that. More on censorship, more on the hearings on taxpayer funding for NPR and PBS. Trump announces 45% tariffs coming on automobiles, and a whole bunch more, plus your calls and comments. 866-90-RED-I.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.